campus. As I've said for the last couple of days, we are not going to allow our HBCUs to be targeted by these people, and so we're going to provide security help with them. We also have FDLE on site today evaluating security on campus and making recommendations for any additional infrastructure improvements. Also, per the request at yesterday's vigil, we're able to do $100,000 to the charity that's supporting the victims' families, and those funds are all coming from Volunteer Florida. So we're going to continue to work with those folks in the days and weeks ahead. As of 0800 today, 90 miles south of Cuba, Tropical Storm Idalia continues to gather strength. It will become a hurricane today, and it is forecast to reach landfall as a major hurricane, a Category 3. I think it's important to point out, if we were sitting here 3 days ago, a lot of people thought it would end up being a tropical storm. Then they said, well, maybe a Category 1. Then yesterday it was, oh, maybe it'll hit Cat 2. Now there really doesn't seem anything to prevent it from continuing to strengthen. And we've seen this before with something like Hurricane Michael that continued to gather strength. So this is going to be a major impact, and Floridians should expect that this storm will be a major Cat 3 plus hurricane. So please prepare accordingly. The National Hurricane Center currently has hurricane watches in effect for the Gulf Coast from Sarasota County all the way up to Franklin County in northwestern Florida. And this track, if you look at how the models are, there's a general agreement on the track that it's going to take. There's a lot of agreement that it's going to be, somewhere between north of Tampa and Tallahassee. But anything that wobbles with this storm could change that. So pretty much anybody on the west coast of Florida, I mean, you can see major impacts, and so please prepare accordingly. We did submit a pre-landfall declaration to the federal government last night. We anticipate that will be approved. I have expanded our state of emergency, the executive order, to include 13 additional counties, so that'll be 46 that are under a state of emergency, of course, on the Gulf Coast, but also as you look at the track of that storm, you're going to see northern Florida, north central Florida, northeastern Florida counties affected as well. So all of those counties are under a state of emergency. Our state EOC is operating at a level 1, 24-hour operations. This is what we do. Now, all counties in the path of Idalia should have their emergency operations centers activated now. Please request aid from the state as soon as possible. There's a relatively limited window here. If you request aid, Kevin and his team are going to get it to you. But if you wait until 6-8 hours before the storm hits, it's going to be much more difficult to make that happen. So tell us what your needs are, submit those requests, and Kevin and his team are going to work to fill those requests as expeditiously as possible. Evacuation orders. I urge Floridians to heed the admonitions and heed the directives from your local officials. There are going to be evacuation orders issued in all these Gulf Coast counties in the A and B zones. All the barrier islands, places that are low-lying on the coast, you are going to be told to evacuate. So just understand that, and that'll be true probably from Pinellas, maybe even Manatee, all the way up through the Big Bend. Keep in mind, if you're told to evacuate, you do not need to drive hundreds of miles. You do not need to leave the state of Florida. You basically need to go to higher ground. In almost every instance, you can go tens of miles to a shelter, to a hotel, to a friend's house, whatever works for you, and you'll be able to ride out the storm. The key is to not be in those areas that are going to be hit with big-time storm surge and that are going to potentially have life-threatening situations. And so tens of miles, not necessarily need hundreds of miles, and the more people that do a more limited evacuation, more local evacuation, you're not going to have the highways and the roads clogged. So it's not necessary to try to outrun the storm. Just get to higher ground, get in a structure that is going to be able to handle the hurricane, ride it out, and then you'll be able to go back to your property and inspect whatever damage is. So more local evacuations. You do not need to flee to Alabama, Georgia. You don't need to drive hundreds and hundreds of miles. Now, fuel. We have 35 bobtails and 15 tankers of fuels are en route to Central Florida, 2 pre-stage with a couple 100,000 gallons of fuel. We had limited fuel interruptions with Hurricane Ian, but you never know how that works, so we want to be able to have fuel to be able to get that back on target as soon as the storm passes. We have 7 urban search and rescue teams ready to deploy to impacted areas, and of course we have Florida Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Florida Fish and Wildlife, all those folks will be ready to go. So as soon as that storm passes, they will be on the ground helping out Floridians. We have 2,500 guardsmen and airmen that are pre-staged, but 3,000 more are currently being mobilized and are on the way for a total of 5,500. And they'll have at their disposal 2,400 high-wheel vehicles, 12 aircraft. Kevin is also requesting through the EMAC additional rotary wing assets from other states, and we anticipate that those requests will be fulfilled. Schools. Hernando County schools are closed today, Citrus and Levy tomorrow. There will be more counties to come in terms of school closures, and so parents just understand that that's coming.